without further ado, I'd like to introduce our chair, who is James Waikiba from Kenya, and I'll allow James to introduce himself. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much, Jamie, for that introduction. My name is James Waikiba. I am an environmental activist and a plastic waste campaigner based in Kenya. I have been campaigning against plastic since 2013, and my campaign led to the ban on plastic bags in Kenya. We are still doing a lot of work here because our environment is technically swamped with plastics. Not just plastics, but also small plastic particles, which are called nodules or microplastics, or pellets, which are now almost everywhere. So that's what I'm doing with my colleagues here in Kenya. We want to see a clean environment, because clean environment is a human right for everyone. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to every one of you joining us for today's Solutions to End Pellet Pollution webinar. As we all know, nadu pollution is a significant threat to wildlife and the environment across the world. Addressing the issue requires action on national and international scale. By improving laws and the regulations surrounding nadu pollution production, transportation, and handling, we can prevent nadu spilling into the environment. In today's webinar, we are going to be discussing laws to end pellet pollution, looking particularly at how laws can be used and be influenced at a national level to combat nadu pollution. We have three fantastic guest speakers joining us from across the world, sharing their knowledge and experience influencing laws to address nadu pollution, with advice on how you can apply this in your own work or in our own work. There will be a question and answer session at the end where we will discuss the topic further and answer any questions you might have. And today I'm joined by Jess Tunnel. I hope I've said it correctly. Jess is the director of the missions Aransas Reserve at the University of Texas Marine Science Institute, where he has been since 2014. Jess is the founder of a citizen science project called Nadu Patrol that tracks plastic pellet concentrations internationally to create awareness on plastics in the ocean and develop new policy based on the data. Jess will be talking about nadu policy efforts in the United States using nadu patrol data. We're also joined by Heidi Tights, who will be our also speaker. Heidi is the CEO and founder of Kangaroo Blue. We'll be talking about plastic pellet policy in Australia and their work surrounding it. And also, we shall also be joined by Lucy Padovani. Lucy is our joint staff rider in 2021, supporting the work addressing pellet pollution, and is now a marine litter lobbying officer. Welcome all. And to kick start our conversation, we'll be joined by Jess Tunnel. Her presentation is pre-recorded. So let's hear from Jess Tunnel from Nadu Patrol on US regulations on pellet pollution.
Okay. Thanks for having me today and talking about nurdle policy in the U.S. My name is Jace Tunnel, and I'm with the University of Texas Marine Science Institute in Port Aransas, Texas. And I also run the Nurdle Patrol program, and that's where we collect plastic pellets, mainly in the U.S. And so I'll kind of go through some of how you collect the data, what it's going towards, and hopefully some of the solutions that we're coming up with. Okay, so you all know what a nurdle is. You all probably gotten multiple presentations on this. These are getting out. What we're finding here in the United States is how they're getting out is not only at the manufacturing site, but also during transportation. And then also when these nurdles are offloaded at the factory that's going to melt them down and, blow them into an actual product. We here in the U.S. mainly use rail is how a lot of the nurdles are transported. And so we were finding a lot of nurdles along rail lines as well. So we have translated a lot of our materials for education about nurdles into Spanish. We have a project where we're working throughout Mexico and trying to establish partnerships down there for doing a similar type thing of collecting the data, putting it into nurdlepatrol.org so that we can see a bigger picture to really show what's going on to change policy. But our simple methodology is, you go out to a riverbank, a lake shoreline, or a beach, and you look for 10 minutes. And if you don't find any in 10 minutes, then you put 0 nurdles found. If you do find some, just calculate how many you find in that 10-minute period, and then it'll show up on a map. And so we are really concentrating on the U.S. That's why you'll see most of the nurdles that were collected here and data is for the U.S., but also down into Mexico. Although we've had about 25 countries put data into the nurdlepatrol.org so far, but we feel like the policy that we can change is in the U.S. And Mexico, so we're really been concentrating our efforts there. Although anyone in the world can use it. It's a great tool that's you can print up the information and send it to your elected officials. So if you look here, we use a color coding the same as FIDRA for the Great Nurdle Hunt, whereas the warmer the colors, the higher the concentration of plastic pellets are found within a 10-minute period. And so all our data is standardized for one person sampling for 10 minutes at a time. So Texas is kind of the hub for high concentrations of plastic pellets being found. It's also the highest concentration of plastic manufacturing in the U.S. So you can see here on the map where Houston is, there's a lot of purples. That's over 1,000 nurdles being found in a 10-minute period by one person. So that's really high concentrations. And so this map right here has been very helpful in trying to change policy in Texas at the state level for not only manufacturers, but any company that handles plastic pellets. So, kind of seeing is believing. That's what we're showing here. And you'll see a lot along the Gulf of Mexico. So at the water's edge, at the beach, there's a lot of surveys that have been done. But if you look inland, a lot of those are rivers around lakes that are drinking water supply for cities and also railroads. So if we look at Galveston Bay, and this is where there's about 55 plastic manufacturing sites. This is the Houston area. So you might have heard of Houston, Texas. That's kind of the mecca for, all kinds of oil and gas operations, stuff like that, but also for making plastics. And so you can see this from the Gulf of Mexico up into where it says Houston up there. That's about 30 to 35 miles. So that's way up in there. So we know that this isn't just coming from ocean currents. This is actually from plastic manufacturing sites and transporters of plastic pellets. And so really high concentrations. And so this image here has been really helpful as well for trying to work with the state agency that's supposed to be regulating these plastics industries. The latest statistics we have for Nurdle Patrol is we have about 7,500 volunteers that have sent data in so far. Over 17,000 surveys have been done around the world, but by far the majority of the surveys are done within the United States and now starting to get down into Mexico. We have about 250 partner organizations that we work with. And so a partner organization, I'll tell you a little bit about in upcoming slides, but it's easy to become a partner, and we give you a toolkit for starting up your own Nurdle Patrol citizen science project. And then we also have teacher kits that we try to educate the next generation coming up into the world about what plastic pellets are and what they can do to help solve the problem. Really in Texas, what has started, and the US, what has started policy changes is by a lady named Diane Wilson. And she's an author. She's written a number of different books, but one of her most famous ones is An Unreasonable Woman. She's also a fourth generation shrimper. And so she ended up suing Formosa Plastics, settling for $50 million, with all that money going back into education, restoration projects, and research around the Bay system where where that plastic manufacturing site was. But the other key thing to this is Formosa Plastics agreed to put zero plastic discharge into their stormwater and wastewater permits, which is how the nurdles were getting out into the environment here. So that's huge because it set a precedence for, if this company can do it, all companies, not only in Texas, but around the rest of the US can do it. And so that's what we've been sort of advocating for. The Formosa settlement, Nurdle Patrol got $1 million of that. We get $200,000 every June. And so we're about to get into our fourth year. And what we do with that is we create partner kits. So you can see this lady here on the right-hand side is holding a duffel bag. It has 100 glass sampling vials, tweezers, field notebooks, everything you would need to be able to start up a citizen science project or incorporate Nurdle surveys into your existing program. So if y'all are interested in that, go to our homepage at nurdlepatrol.org. And if you're part of an organization, just click on the link and we'll send you one, no matter where you're at in the world. And then we also have teacher kits. These are both in English and Spanish, and the same thing there. Go to our homepage, and we send kits out to teachers to teach them about what nurdles are and plastics, how they get into the environment, and then the students develop the solutions to the problem. So we're trying to get the students kind of interactive to think about this. So we believe for the Nurdle Patrol that we can have the biggest impact on working on policy changes for permits for any company handling plastics in the U.S. by the state level. So we go by state, and swift enforcement and steep fines have to follow because money talks when it comes to these big companies. Some stuff has changed. So this was the policy in Texas. The state of Texas in 2016 to 2021, it said, manufacturers shall minimize the possibility of discharging nurdles. Well, that obviously wasn't good enough because you've seen the data from that. So they recently changed in August of 2021 that manufacturer facilities shall prevent discharge of plastic pellets. And so that has been helpful. We think that it needs to be stricter and to say that zero plastic pellet discharge. So there is a bill that's out right now in the legislative session here in Texas to try to get to that zero plastic pellet discharge. And so if you're interested on that, follow us on our Facebook page or our nurdlepatrol.org, Nurdle Patrol Facebook page, and we will make announcements as that kind of stuff comes out. The next thing we're kind of targeting is the railroad industry and trying to see how we can change policy for the companies that own the railroads and how they're transporting these nurdles. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. If you have any questions about nurdlepatrol.org as you go through our website or anything, feel free to email me, jace@utexas.edu, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Bye.
That was very enlightening presentation by Jess there, and he's mentioned that in a certain area there are over 55 plastic manufacturing sites, basically petrochemical company sites, and I think that is worrying. Trying to imagine the amount of pellets that could be ending up in the environment, and I think these companies can only be pushed by law to be able to stop discharging plastic pellets into the environment. Next up is Heidi Tate. Tate will be discussing laws in Australia and their perspective on pellet pollution in Australia. Tate, take over.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen quickly. All right, if someone can give me a thumbs up that you can see that, that would be great. Excellent, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to everybody this evening and who's watching this as a recording. My name's Heidi Tate. I'm the CEO and the founder of the Tangaroa Blue Foundation. We're an Australian registered charity. We were founded in 2004, so we have been around for about 19 years, and we coordinate a program called the Australian Marine Debris Initiative. So here we go. As we do in Australia, I'd just like to say that I'm joining you from Gia and Ngaro country. That's the traditional owner names of the land on which I'm joining you from today, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge their continuous relationship to this land and the ongoing cultures of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people across Australia. The Australian Marine Debris Initiative is a network. It's a network of community groups, individual volunteers, partner organisations, government agencies and industry bodies. And they work together on the removal, the documentation and the prevention of marine debris and litter escaping into our environment. And so when I talk about the AMD, that's what I'm talking about, the Australian Marine Debris Initiative. And this is the AMD network environmental impact since this program started in 2004. It's with the collaboration of more than 3,500 organisations, and I'm excited to see one of those organisations also on this call this evening, Michelle from OzMap, who does a lot of the microplastic or the Australian microplastics project down there. And we work together on these programs, and the database has just kicked over 23 million data points. So it's the biggest one in the Southern Hemisphere and one of the biggest ones in the world. And so just like to acknowledge the data that we present is from a collaboration and not just the work of Tangaroa Blue. We have a data collection app that is for citizen science, and we are so excited that we are just coming up to the end of a massive upgrade that allows us to continue to collect data from cleanup activities, but also from monitoring activities. And our work on microplastics and with OzMap will be able to use this platform as well. And that's available on both the Android and the Apple platforms. Even though it is Australian, there's no reason why other people around the world can't use it. And so we encourage people to get in contact with us if they have particular projects where they need a data collection platform and can't or don't really want to set up one of their own. So the AMD framework is all about science-driven solutions. So the cleanups and the data collection really are the starting point for us and able to have conversations because we have evidence. And so that evidence is our core database, and that enables us to engage in activities around education and engagement, also source reduction plans, government policy and programs and reports, research and campaigns. And the source reduction plans is what I wanted to talk to you about today, a particular one that we've been doing on plastic feedstock loss into the environment. So I know that when we all started on this journey, we started using this word called a nurdle, and I'm encouraging people to consider that term moving forward, because nurdles are only one form of plastic feedstock that is being lost into the environment. What we found in Australia is the industry doesn't actually know what a nurdle is, because they don't call it a nurdle. It seems that the community and the government call it nurdles. And so we need to just align the language on what we're talking about. So when we talk about plastic industrial feedstock, we're talking about plastic resin pellets, also known as nurdles, but also we're talking about plastic powder, flake, chip, and more importantly, or we've seen more of, is recycle it. And with China not accepting the world's waste anymore, we have to start looking at reusing our own waste and recycling our own waste domestically. And so our recycling market is booming in Australia. And we're starting to see recycle it or recycled chip also escaping. So I think we need to be careful in what we want the industry to stop polluting. And it's not just nurdles or raw plastic pellets anymore. It's all types of industrial plastic feedstock. In Australia, we've been using a rating tool at industrial sites, which is different to, for example, the work that AusMap's doing at beaches and other kind of sites where they may lay out a transect and quadrants and counting stuff. I'm sure that everybody is aware that if you try and do that on some plastic factory grass verge out the front of their factory, that you're probably not going to make any friends anytime soon. So when we're grading plastic feedstock loss from the industry, we're using a 1 to 5 rating at how dense that loss is. And here's some photos of factories that we've discovered, and the two on the far left and the far right are what we would consider a rating 5, and the one in the middle we would consider a rating 4. And so a rating 1 means we didn't find any at all. And that's how we've been documenting feedstock loss at factory sites, just because quite often we have to do it quite covertly. We're walking past, we're having a look what we can observe. We're not sitting there and setting up transects or quadrants in industrial areas. Another type of data that we've been collecting is with a stormwater drain project we've been doing. And this particular one that I'm going to refer to is one that we've been running in Victoria, which has a very large plastic industry presence. We installed 120 of these stormwater traps with the help of local council, local government, in 6 of these areas. And we put them and distributed them across CBDs, public transport settings, shopping precincts, and industrial areas. And we service them every 6 weeks. And no surprising there that in industrial areas, we found a whole heap of plastic feedstock. And this is part of our evidence that we're collecting. And so we saw that the majority of micro debris was most abundant in industrial areas, and we actually didn't even see any change of that during lockdown, which was quite concerning. The data of this was presented and published in the Science of the Total Environment. We had help with the University of New South Wales. And so there's been a lot of interest in Australia from a legislative perspective of this kind of data of what's escaping where within a catchment. The other thing that we did, and I know that people will roll their eyes when they see Operation Clean Sweep, and that's totally understandable, but we've taken a little bit of a twist of it in Australia. So in 2015, Tangaroa Blue Foundation was successful in a Victorian government grant to implement Operation Clean Sweep into Australia. It's an only example that we're aware of where an environmental NGO is actually co-licensed with the plastics industry to run Operation Clean Sweep in their country. And we believe that this provides an extra layer of accountability as well as industry expertise in what's actually practical. It also provides an opportunity to lobby for integration within government legislation. And I'm not saying that this is or was easy. There was a lot of banging our heads on brick walls to try and get to speak to the right people within the industry, but it has provided a platform where we have been able to see measurable improvement in plastic feedstock pollution. And that's because we're starting to see legislative change as well as engagement from the industry in best practice. We have our own Operation Clean Sweep Australia website, and I'm happy to speak to anybody about this further if they're interested in this program and how we've adapted it in Australia to engage a level of accountability. That has enabled the lobbying that we've been doing and the work that we've been doing with the evidence, the data, the industry and the government with some legislative frameworks. And the first one was in 2021, the Australian government released their National Plastics Plan. It is an ad hoc group of ideas without any real roles and responsibilities or funding associated to it, which is a bit disappointing. However, it has listed the things that the Australian government thinks are priorities when preventing pollution from plastics. And Operation Clean Sweep actually got listed as a target. So we've been able to get the Australian government to accept that we should be having some kind of best practice around handling, and that's great to see. That has filtered down somewhat to the other states, and like most countries, the states is where this is kind of the roles and responsibilities from compliance sits at the state level. So within Western Australia, we had the light industry program, which was run through the Department of Environment Regulation, and this looked at discharges to the environment that were a certain schedule of a certain list of particular items that were escaping in light industrial areas. And it was a collaboration between state and local governments. Our first compliance response was actually in Western Australia in 2013, and they were able to issue field notices for plastic feedstock escaping out of premises into wetland areas. In New South Wales, over the last year or so, we've had the New South Wales Plastics Action Plan, and they have also included an outcome 3, which is to reduce plastic leakage, which includes nurdles entering the environment. It's taken us some time to get them to adjust their language as well, because if they are trying to stop microplastics, then they have to address more than just nurdles. And so we've got them talking feedstock language now, which is great as well. But they have invested $500,000 in a program that is something like Operation Clean Sweep to roll out with the industry, and we were successful in tendering for that. So we'll be engaging industry in that program, and now we have the New South Wales EPA who will be responsible for the compliance, and also they have an incentive because they're investing in actually rolling it out, which is great to see at that state level. In Victoria, we had a really interesting issue prior to 2018, where local council thought that it was the EPA's responsibility for compliance responses for plastic feedstock loss. And the EPA thought it was local council thought it was EPA, so nobody was doing anything. So part of that initial rollout of Operation Clean Sweep in Australia, besides engaging the industry, was engaging the government in figuring out who was responsible to do the butt kicking when pollution existed. And the EPA finally took their role in that and issued these guidances in handling plastic feedstock for the industry, which basically put the industry on notice that somebody was now looking at an issue that previously nobody had been looking at. And they also rolled out a program which was really interesting called the Opal offices. And these were actually EPA offices that were embedded into local council to fill some of these gaps that were existing. And we had some great success with the Opal offices actually engaging with local businesses in industrial plastic pollution. There was just a case study that they put up on their website that basically said down the bottom here, you can see, thanks to the drain buddies, which were those stormwater traps, and Tangaroa Blue's audits, the Opal officer was able to show site managers the extent of the problem, which was eye-opening for them. And we were able to see a reduction of nurdles captured by the drain buddies on site practice as site practices improved. So there was a real connection between the industry and legislation there. And we have a bit of a win here. You can see feedstock, and this is from a recycler, escaping under the fence. And after having those Opal officers visiting the premises a few times, they managed to seal the base of their fence there to reduce the loss. And then the last thing I just wanted to share is this new legislation that's come out in Victoria, which is all based on what they're calling the general environmental duty. So it's a real massive shift from the Victorian EPA, from doing compliance responses because of pollution to actually doing compliance responses because prevention measures aren't in place. So the general environmental duty is an obligation for all businesses and individuals to proactively minimise risks of harm to human health and the environment from their activities so far as reasonably practicable. And the businesses will need to demonstrate that they have assessed their risks effectively and acted to reduce them appropriately. So this is all based on another term they're using called state of knowledge. So what that means is that if everybody in your industry knows that best practice is a certain thing and you're not doing it, then you're not meeting your general environmental duty based on the current state of knowledge within your industry. And if we can get everybody knowing that Operation Clean Sweep Australia is best practice to reduce plastic resin pellets loss and other feedstock loss, and a company can't show the measures that they have put in place that at least meet that obligation, then they could be fined, regardless of whether they're polluting or not. So it's a real shift from the compliance, focus from pollution to prevention. And we think that this is a really, really exciting shift. And we hope the other EPAs in Australia adopt this framework as well. And they are looking at a national EPA now in Australia as well. So there is a website link there. It hasn't, this general environmental duty hasn't been tested in the courts yet, but there is some work being done behind the scenes to actually see if we can test it. Because I think that once somebody gets dragged across the coals into the court for not meeting their general environmental duty, that will also give a real shift and notice to the industry that they have to start cleaning up their act. So we would say that if anybody in the legislative framework is looking for a different model for the EPA to look at, this is a really, really interesting one to look at. And that is pretty much my presentation. So thank you for your time and happy to answer questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Heidi. I can imagine how hard it is to collect plastic pellets and the nodules from the environment. And, it's important that we do our best to prevent them, using laws especially, because once they are out there in the environment, they are too tiny, too little even to be able to collect. So thank you, Heidi, for sharing with us about laws and what you are doing about nodule pollution in Australia. And the next presenter is Rusi Padovani. Rusi will be discussing legislation in France and the European Union. Lucy, I know you are ready. You can go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present what's happening in the EU and what's happening in France as well. So I'll just quickly share my presentation. I hope you can see it well. Okay. So first of all, I'm just going to quickly present my organization. So I'm from Surfrider Foundation Europe. We're an European NGO that was created in 1990. And we're a grassroots organization, so we rely on our volunteers, on the data that we get from them. We're present in 12 countries across the EU. And we work on three main areas, three main topics. So marine litter, water quality and health of users, and coastal management and the impact of climate change on the coast. So in the context of our work on marine litter, we started working on the root of the issue, and the root of plastic pollution is pellets. And it implies also a massive pollution across the EU that we had report from our volunteers for years now. So just to give you a few numbers, although it's really difficult to quantify this pollution because it's difficult to have access actually to numbers on this pollution, we estimate that around 160,000 tons of pellets are lost in the EU each year. When we say lost, it's mismanaged and spilled into the environment by the industries and transporters and all of the supply chain. So it's the second most important source of primary microplastic pollution. And we expect that plastic use will double in the EU by 2060. So that is why we believe that we need to put a clear and strict framework now to prevent this pollution, because otherwise, I mean, even in the current situation, we have this pollution happening at a huge scale in the EU. So we need to put a framework now urgently. So as I said, it's a systemic pollution in the EU, but it's the same in the rest of the world, obviously. So it implies the whole value chain. It's either acute or chronic losses, and it's transboundary. So it goes from one country to another through water stream, through the ocean, through the sea, or through road transport. So I've just put on the screen 5 cases that we've highlighted in our report in 2020 on the issue, but there are many more in the EU. Those are ones that are either from one accident or more continuous, such as in Antwerp or in Tarragona, for example. There is also a case in Ecosyn where we went to a couple of times because it's in Belgium, so really close to the EU institution, actually. And you can see here videos that was taken just across a petrochemical site. So it's a heavy pellet pollution that has been ongoing for more than 15 years now. It's directly linked to the petrochemical site next to it that are OCS signatories, as we mentioned this initiative. I know it's not the same depending on the region. We each have our own. In the EU, the one that we have, we can see that it's not an incentive enough and it's not binding. So we can see that even being signatories, we have spills happening and going for years and years now. And of course, this pollution has impact on the local communities, on farmers, on the environment, and the marine environment as well. So just to give you a quick overview of the EU framework, because it's not so, it does not seem maybe so logical. So the EU decided to split the issue of microplastics into 2 different package, I would say. So we have the intentionally added microplastics, so that is all that is sport pitches, the cosmetics, for example, also medical equipment. And in this regulation, we also have some measures on reporting and labeling requirements for pellet losses. And this text was adopted just a few weeks ago, so in late April 2023. And then we have another package that we're waiting for. So it's an initiative on microplastic pollution, and it's on unintentionally released microplastics. So that is pellets, textiles, tires, but also from paints, detergents, and geotextiles. In this case, the impact assessment of the Commission is still ongoing, so they need to finish this impact assessment before actually publishing an initiative. And we find that it's quite difficult for them to get access to data on the losses, to get estimation on what is happening during the transport, for example, because it's really difficult to really put accountability on the actors involved when the losses happen, for example, when the truck is being loaded or some issues like this. So now we have the gaps to be addressed by the EU. So that is what we're advocating for. So in the second part of the regulation I told you about, so in the initiative that is being written at the moment, for now, we don't have any binding obligations. We don't have reduction targets for pellet loss. We don't have reporting requirements, and we don't have transparency and independent control. And that is why the issue, although it's already quite massive, we believe that it's much bigger in reality than what we can measure for now. And that is why we need more access to data, to what's happening actually in the industries, and they need to provide this data, and they need to set preventive measures on the sites, but also the entire value chain. So for now, the current situation is just the voluntary initiative in the form of Operation Clean Sweep. And because it's not binding and it's mainly the production sites, the transporters don't have to abide by it, for example, and the recycling sites and all of those. So we still have gaps in this framework. So what can be done? I just spoke quicker than my slides. So yeah, what can be done? We would need binding instruments, of course, a supply chain approach to make sure that every actor of the supply chain is actually covered by the regulation. And we will need, of course, more control, independent control by an external party. I just listed what we're advocating for that is more a technical requirements, but really we just want clarity, accountability, and control on what is actually happening. And now, just to give you a quick overview of the French regulation, because French actually went a bit ahead to adopt a regulation. So in February 2020, in the context of the law for the reduction of waste and the promotion of a circular economy, some prevention measures were actually adopted to prevent pellet loss. So equipment and procedures for industrial sites that produce, handle, and transport plastic pellets. So that was quite a big win. And mandatory regular inspections by independent certified bodies. So that is also a big win for us. Of course, the law in its first version was a bit more ambitious, but once it was adopted, some part of this ambition was lost on the way. We still hope for now stronger measures because there was numerous cases of plastic pellet pollution happening in France in January on the coast. Those pictures are from then. So we also believe that France could push the EU in that way to get a better framework at EU level, because it's also something that is being said. I'm guessing you have the same issue in case of federal countries. We need everyone to get on board at some point, but it's nice to have some going a bit ahead and showing the example and showing that it's actually possible to regulate the issue and not just leave it at the hand of the players of the industries. So that is all from me. I hope that was clear. And if you have any question, of course, I remain available. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Lucy. That was very clear. Thank you so much. And I'm shocked that we have over 160,000 tons of plastic pellets being released or leaking into the environment. I can imagine plastic pellets are very tiny stuff like I have them here, and 160,000 tons. Damn, that's a lot. And indeed, as you have said, we need everyone on board to address this problem that we have. Next up, so thank you so much, Lucy, for that. Next up is group discussion, and I'll be asking maybe random questions and you can answer them. I won't pick specific answer to answer. And my first question is, do we need more laws? Do we need more laws to address the issue of pellet pollution? Who is going to take this question? Heidi, you want to take it?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question very clearly. Could you repeat it?
Yeah, certainly. The question is, do we need more laws to address plastic pellet pollution?
No, I don't think we need more rules. I think we need the rules that we have to be enforced. There are so many litter rules out there and pollution rules out there already. It's what we found in Victoria was that a compliance response wasn't allowed by officers, even though they could see it was pollution, because it wasn't a priority that they were given to respond to. So I think we need to look at what rules already exist and make sure that they're being used effectively and properly. Because yeah, there's no point having more rules if we're not going to use them.
Oh, thank you. Here in Kenya, we have so many environmental protection laws that calling for more laws sometimes, even Kenyans ask, but we are not in shortage of laws. Why not just implement what we already have? And I think it's a case with many other countries. We have existing laws. We just need goodwill, political goodwill to implement them, and they will work for the sake of our environment and us. My next question is, are fines enough to prevent pellet spills? That is related again to laws, but of course existing laws are fines enough. Lucy, you want to take it?
Sorry, I'm not sure I heard it correctly. Did you say fines enough to prevent?
Yes, are fines enough to prevent or to curb?
I think what is needed, at least from our experience of what we know at the EU level, it's a clear framework, as I said, really, because for now, it's still difficult because we get responded with the competitivity argument, for example. If it's not the same rule for everyone, then we will lose an advantage on the others, or we will pay more, or we will have less reasons to abide by the law. So we need something that is clear. And of course, we need accountability for the pollution. And at Surfrider, we believe in the polluter pays principle. So we believe that if you pollute and if it's proven, then you should, of course, remediate and pay maybe something, but also put the environment in the good status, and of course take prevention measures to avoid it happening again. I think that's the key, because as we said, once it's spilled, it's really difficult to remove from the environment, and money doesn't solve the issue in this case as well. What is needed is to avoid the pollution at source, and that is not the most expensive things, we believe, for a lot of industries, actually. It's just measures that they need to implement.
Thank you, Lucy. Maybe my question will go to Jamie, who's been quiet there. And Jamie, you've been quiet, and that is good because you're following. But how can NGOs use existing laws to address issues of pellet pollution?
So, as said by Heidi, there's quite a lot of existing laws already that apply to various pollution. So by trying to highlight these laws existing and by pushing them to be enforced, then I think that we can really influence those laws, that side of those laws being used more effectively. And this could be through, like, say, using the evidence to show that it's a problem, that these laws should also apply to the plastic pellet pollution, not just maybe like plastic waste as a more, but also plastic pellets also come under that. And by using the data and the evidence to show that, then NGOs are able to try to push governments and bodies and local government to enforce those laws in a more effective way.
Yeah, and of course, I do think civil society has a very big role to play to try and raise an awareness and also advocate for such kind of policies. And, you know, we are also the people, especially civil society, who have the mouth to shout. And whenever there are these issues, we document pollution. I've seen Haiti from Tangaroa Blue documenting pellet pollution from factories, and they have been able to address some of it either by building walls or really trying to prevent the leakage from the soil. And that's the way to go. And one other question before I can see our time is quickly lining out. What steps can you take to influence or amend the existing laws? Heidi, you can take that.
Sorry, what's the best way to use existing laws, did you say?
Yeah, what steps can we take to influence or amend the existing laws?
Yeah, sorry. I think what you said about providing the evidence, that is so key. Like plastic feedstock loss was not an issue in Australia at all, and we've made it an issue. And then when we make it an issue, the politicians have to act because now they have to do something that's an issue. So I think that, you know, data collection that's robust is really important, having the evidence that you can present. And I think that, you know, this issue is a lot more higher scale than it used to be in the past. You know, we've got the UN plastic treaty happening. People are talking about plastic pollution. Now's a good time to leverage off that interest into this issue and really highlight what's happening in your local areas and do it in a really I think that, you know, there are really good people in the plastics industry as well. You just need to find a couple of champions that agree with that you shouldn't lose feedstock, and that can really help leverage the discussion as well. So I think that those are kind of things. Have the evidence, find your industry champions, leverage the issue, and look at what laws that you can actually connect it to with politicians, and that's the framework.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I think that was a very interesting conversation we had. Do we have any questions on the chat box, Jamie?
Sorry. So yeah, thank you very much for all the speakers and from the chair, from everyone. Thank you for all the questions. They were great. And I have just a couple of bits of housekeeping to do at the end to bring this session to a close. That is okay, everyone. So I'm just going to share my screen. So just a couple of things we wanted to mention. A lot of the information that we've talked about today and about policies and solutions, and a lot of that is on our information hub, which you can find through the links that will be in the chat, and we'll also send through in the follow-up email. So it's got a lot of great resources for NGOs and for trying to address pellet pollution wherever you are. If you could also leave us some feedback on our webinars, that would be fantastic. We'll also send a link afterwards to through the email. So any feedback would be great. It helps us make these webinars better and more helpful for people in the future. And a couple of other updates in the campaigns that are going on in the world of nurdles. Fauna and Flora have recently released a petition in relation to the current International Maritime Organization negotiations that are going on. And if you could go and sign that petition, it would really help push for the work they're trying to do around the International Maritime Organization and the control of trying to get improved handling and control of pellets during transport at sea. Also, the Environmental Investigation Agency have recently released a brand new report on global plastics, including nurdles. So you can check that out. It has a lot of really useful, up-to-date and interesting information in there, all about nurdles. And then what's next for FIDRA and the Great Global Nurdle Hunt? Well, this year we'll be launching our Great Global Nurdle Hunt campaign between the 1st and 31st of October. So there'll be more information about that coming out in the coming months, and it'll be great to have as many people as possible involved in that. We've also got some new webinars coming out in the coming months. These ones are going to help prepare you and other NGOs for the upcoming Great Nurdle Hunt, Global Nurdle Hunt. So we'll be talking about how to nurdle hunt, what nurdles are, how you can use social media to help in your campaigns around it and promote your work. And I think with that, it's just all that's left for me to say is thank you to all our speakers who have given the time, and to our chair as well for doing a fantastic job, and all the participants who have come along. And we'll be sending out the recording of this in the next day or two, so you'll be able to watch back anything you've missed, and we'll also put links for all the information discussed in that email too. Thank you very much.
And thank you to Fedra for organizing this session on plastic pellets, very important. Thank you also to our presenter speakers, Lucy, Jess, and Heidi. Thank you so much. Goodbye.